It all began when portals appeared and monsters came out, spreading chaos until the hunters awakened. 7 hunters created noble families, but one man reached the top without any divine help, all on his own. Protagonist became famous in the East as a miracle warrior who walked alongside shadowy skulls. But the noble families and the stars soon decided his existence was a great threat to the established order. With that, an entire city was consumed by raging flames as if it were a real inferno. Many warriors were defeated after being sent there just to take down the invincible hero. Then, the famous magic family made their grand entrance with a huge banner in the middle of the chaotic scene. The protagonist was on the ground, holding a broken watch and badly hurt from the chaos. He struggled to breathe, his face showing extreme exhaustion from the grueling battle. Even kneeling and missing an arm, the warrior kept a steady gaze on his opponent. Filled with rage, the young man cried out against the old mage named Dimitri for causing all the destruction. The enemy sat atop the rubble, arrogantly watching the disaster unfold. Mage was the embodiment of a powerful deity, and he mocked the unfortunate fate of the unprotected young man. The boy coughed weakly and asked why they were trying to get rid of him. He asked if the problem was his lack of a deity, or because he refused to join the nobles. The old man laughed and confirmed both, saying the gods hate anyone who can become strong on their own. Then, the old man stated that the immortal king has power that rivals all of them, which frightens the others. The young man thought that excuse was complete nonsense and kept his furious glare on the sorcerer, but his opponent explained that undead magic breaks the world's rules and offends the natural order. Then, the mage began to glow with a golden light, saying the heavens had abandoned the shadow warrior. The young man mocked the old man for hiding behind celestial power and warned him that he'd been quiet for a reason. At that moment, he raised his hand, and powerful dark energy began to emanate from his battered body. Numerous bones scattered on the ground began to tremble and glow with that same eerie purple aura. A whirlwind of dark magic swept through the area, showing that the hunter still had a few tricks up his sleeve. He then cast a secret technique, creating a huge domain of despair around the observing enemy. The old man quickly realized this ability drained spirits as an army of skeletons began to rise. Impressed by his remaining strength, the old man decided to use his most destructive spell. The sorcerer summoned the great eye of his deity and fired a golden beam down toward the ground. Protagonist looked up, surprised by the absurd attack coming straight to erase him from existence. The young man quickly realized that if his shadow barrier couldn't take the impact, it would be all over for him. A huge sphere of red light exploded with destructive and overwhelming energy. With that, a beam of power shot toward the hunter at high speed. Without hesitation, even in what seemed to be his final moments, the young man smiled and decided to risk it all on one last try. The old mage was shocked, not understanding the reason for that smile at a time like this. Then the protagonist revealed a golden pocket watch he'd been holding in his hand. He pointed the artifact at the spell, saying the item could interfere with time. A message appeared saying the object would return to the past because the requirements had been met. Then, a golden light erupted as time began to reverse for the warrior. He explained that he didn't have divine power, but he realized he could take his enemies. This way, the hunter used the watch to absorb the mage's attack. As the old man watched in astonishment, Dimitri became desperate and yelled, asking what on earth the immortal king was doing. The young man said he was going to borrow the divine power the old man was so proud of. With a confident smile, the young man promised that next time he would crush the noble families. Right after that, the hands of the watch began to spin backward rapidly. Then, a very bright light filled the scene, taking the hunter's consciousness with it. After the flash, the first thing he saw was the ceiling of a simple modern room. Protagonist woke up startled in his bed, his whole body feeling very confused. He quickly put a hand on his chest, feeling his heart beating fast as he looked around. But the warrior noticed something familiar and recognized that this was the house where he used to live. The place was the same with the TV, the fridge, and all the furniture he remembered. Sitting on the bed, he looked at the watch and wondered if his plan really worked. Filled with anger, the young man vowed to make the mage Dimitri pay for everything that had happened. Then, a blue screen showed that the watch was now broken and could not be used again. Even so, the hunter smiled because his risky bet had paid off in the end. He remembered that this was the day the system appeared almost 10 years ago. Soon, a status screen showed his name and his level. 1 stats as a beginner. System then asked the young man to choose a starting class from 3 options. He noticed that in the beginning, only the most basic classes were available for players. time, the young man decided he wouldn't rush and would survive at all costs. With that, the protagonist got up and put on a jacket. Ready to use his knowledge, the young man headed to a large building known as the Natsuhabara Hunter Market. Inside, a friendly employee greeted him with a welcome and a warm smile. The attendant started talking about the items, but he interrupted her and asked for a rare ring. The saleswoman was clearly confused by the young man's request and gave him a strange look. She said the item was cursed, but the young man replied that he already knew and just wanted the price. Shortly after, the protagonist walked through the market after making his purchase at the store. The employee had still asked if he really wanted to buy it, despite all the risks. Opening the box, he knew that a cursed item like this wouldn't normally be worth that much. A blue screen showed the details of the Ring of Lesser Darkness and its terrible curse. Even knowing about the curse, he put on the ring because he knew how to handle the problem. A dark aura appeared because, for those who resist, the item grants the power of necromancy. With a wicked smile, he felt the dark energy flowing through his entire body. Suddenly, he was transported to a dark and gloomy place like an endless void. Inside, he faced the ring's curse head-on without showing a hint of fear. The curse manifested as a golden vision of his arch-enemy, Dimitri the Mage. Protagonist faced the image of the old man, unfazed by his imposing presence. The ghost of the mage taunted him, saying he'd been abandoned by the stars in the sky. Golden apparition extended a hand to launch its power against the young man's mind. The enemy said that even after returning to the past, he would never be able to truly defeat him. With that, a massive attack of light rained down on the young man to break his spirit. He smirked as the system blocked the mental attack from the ring's curse. The attack was repelled by his passive skill called Clear Mind, which protected him. A new message appeared saying he had successfully passed the ring's test. With the victory, the dark scenery began to shatter around him and everything vanished. The Necromancer's power finally awakened and a blue flame appeared in his eye. A dark aura surrounded him and he said he would create an army to rival the gods. The ring he was wearing evolved from rare to epic after he overcame the curse. With a satisfied smile, he now held his new dark ring on his finger. Then the system opened the class screen and he could choose from 4 options. The class that channels power from souls. A purple aura surrounded him, and the class symbol appeared in front of him. The hunter gained the passive ability Guide of the Departed, which would help him greatly. Satisfied with his new power, he noted he was off to a good start, but looking at the skill screen, he realized he only had 2 for now. The first raised the fallen, and the second was for controlling bones at will. The young man thought that even with his knowledge, he couldn't use strong skills yet. He knew that following the system's rules wouldn't lead him to maximum power. Becoming a necromancer this early was good, but it wouldn't be enough for him. To defeat Dimitri, he was going to need the power of an ancient constellation. With a plan in mind, the young man took a plane and traveled to a distant island. His destination was the famous and ancient temple of Cronus, the great god of time. There resided the constellations that lost their light after the defeat against Zeus. The Titans, who accepted the outcome, could still act as deities. The warriors stood before an ancient stone tomb in that place. He remembered that the owner of the broken watch was one of these fallen gods. So, it was time to find this so-called constellation that was imprisoned. Without hesitation, he smashed the pocket watch on top of that ancient altar. A very strong golden light began to emanate from the pieces of the artifact. With that, the ground shook and the scenery around him completely shattered. The young man was taken to a huge hall with a beautiful stained glass window in the background. He looked around and a mysterious voice asked, "Who is in the chamber?" A giant entity appeared, furious, asking who dared to disturb it. But the hunter just smirked, showing no fear of the god. He then greeted the god Cronus, the dethroned king of all titans. The deity of time stared at him with a serious and suspicious look, and the young man continued to hold the remains of the watch that brought him there. Titan then asked if it was the little human who had managed to go back in time. With a smile, the young man confirmed the deed, showing the remains of the watch. The entity praised him but questioned why he was awakened from his slumber. He reminded him that Cronus had lost everything to Olympus and was now just a forgotten name. With a wicked smile, the young man asked if the ancient god didn't want revenge. The god was surprised and with a serious look asked the young man to repeat what he had said. The hunter proposed that the god become his constellation to get his revenge. Angrily, Cronus said that a human could never help a god with their revenge. The young man continued to hold the broken watch in his hand during the conversation. He revealed that he had already reached the 9-star rank on his own and that Zeus was on his list. In addition, all 7 great noble families were also his enemies now. By destroying them, Olympus would lose its influence. But Cronus found this ambition small. The god noted that even after regressing, the boy had chosen the path of a necromancer. The young man said that might be true for the god of time, but not the god of the harvest. An ancient image showed that Cronus actually ruled over both time and the harvest. Scythe was the symbol of the reaper, and both defied the natural order of the world. The Titan became furious at his audacity, and told the human not to be so arrogant. Floor of that sacred place began to tremble with the fury of the ancient deity, but the hunter shouted that this wasn't the time to care about that. He asked if the god was going to live forever without his name and his divine power. The young man continued to taunt him, saying he would become weaker than Olympus. With that, he invited him to reclaim his power and destroy Olympus once and for all. In his thoughts, the young man knew that if his plan failed, he'd be in big trouble. With a smile, Cronus admitted he had never forgotten his desire for revenge. The deity then decided to test if the boy could be the power behind it. Changing his divine nature would be a process of agony and pain for the young man. If he could endure the ordeal, the god promised to become his constellation. The protagonist was shocked to realize the test was starting right then. With that, Cronus extended his hand and named him as his new saint and representative. The hunter was stunned and speechless upon hearing he had become the saint of a god. A golden aura surrounded the young man's body as he received the constellation's sacred power, but the power of darkness and the sacred energy began to conflict within him. He knew that if he passed out now, he would lose his only chance to have a god by his side. Cronus just observed the young man's test of endurance with a cold, imposing look. Despite the intense pain, the hunter strove not to give in to the pressure of that power. With great determination, he forced himself to endure the divine ordeal to the end. After some time, the protagonist was seen walking across the clean floor of an airport. He had finally returned to Japan after successfully completing his trip. With a confident smile, the young man said, "Japan is the best place in the world." Just then, a small version of Cronus appeared and asked if the world had changed much. God floated around his new saint. Commenting on the passage of time, a system screen announced, "A new star has appeared in the pantheon. The Reaper has become the blue giant." Saying he talked a lot for someone who couldn't give blessings. He thought that even without power or followers, the deity seemed quite happy about this. Titan had returned using the concept of the Reaper, but he needed a reputation to gain power. Still, after an eternity of being trapped, it was natural for him to be so excited. Now, the god told the young man to spread his name, and the hunter found himself in a unique situation. He reflected that the saint class was the strongest, and Cronus had turned him into a priest. New class was the saint of the White Knight, which had no penalties for necromancy. He could also convert sacred power into spiritual power and use life drain. The young man realized that using sacred and necromancer powers at the same time was rare. He thought that using both abilities at once was a very broken power. God said a saint is a representative, and the young man understood it was all calculated. The deity boasted about having been the king of the gods, and the warrior became thoughtful. With a smile, the young man decided that the Furjuko portal was a good choice. The ancient garden was a perfect place to test all his new powers. These portals that had appeared in the world connected Earth to other dimensions. They were classified as fluid and disappeared when the dungeon boss was defeated. But fixed, Type 8 portals like the ancient garden existed forever. The garden was a 1-star portal, so it was easy for rookie hunters to enter. In front of the portal, several hunters were looking for a party to enter the dungeon. Our protagonist just observed all the activity with a serious look. Just then, a group approached him and invited him to join them on the mission, but the young man refused the invitation right away and continued alone to the portal. The hunter who called him was a bit embarrassed, but understood his decision. Then a member of the group questioned if the rookie would be okay in there alone. The girl on the team told them not to worry, since it was his choice to go solo, but the warrior knew that at this level he could handle himself just fine alone. With that, he entered the dungeon, and a screen announced that he was in the ancient garden. He walked calmly through the forest and noticed that the place was very quiet. He soon understood this was the classic setup for a surprise attack. With a smile on his face, the young man realized his first prey was already near. Suddenly, he looked up and saw a monster leaping toward him with everything it had. Small creature was a goblin that charged at him with a dagger. The monster tried to hit him with a quick strike, but the young man dodged it easily. The goblin then let out a high-pitched scream as its body glowed with an aura. The hero used his ability and converted his spiritual power into sacred power. Then, the system screen showed all the details of his life drain skill. He activated the ability and sucked the life force from the goblin, which screamed in pain. Hunter realized that using both types of power felt quite similar in the end. With his hands on the monster's chest, he continued to drain all of its energy. A greenish aura surrounded him as he finished his new technique. Soon, the dried-up body of the goblin fell to the ground, and his base stats increased. He got excited seeing his attributes rise when he used Life Drain. He then noted that the bonus for leveling up was 5 status points. With that, taking out 25 goblins was the same as him leveling up once. After the hunt, little Cronus appeared floating beside his contractor. Deity asked if he liked the power, and the young man confirmed it was incredible. The god showed off proudly, and the young man admitted he was right about that. Now that he had a body, he got ready and said the show was about to really begin. A green energy came out of the defeated goblin's eyes as the spell started to work. With a wicked smile, he activated the skill and commanded the body to answer his call. Then, a skeletal hand with a dark aura began to rise from the ground. The goblin's body then began to slowly levitate under the effect of necromancy. Little by little, the creature rose from the ground. Its appearance completely changed. The hunter was satisfied to see his new minions standing and ready to obey. The system announced that the zombie's rate was high and its stats had increased by 97%. The monster was now a 1-star undead, ready for battle. With his new servant, he believed he could handle the work in the garden alone. So, he and his new zombie companion headed deeper into the forest together. But suddenly, a group of 3 goblins emerged from the woods with weapons in hand. Creatures soon spotted the young man with his minion and prepared to attack. The young man thought the situation was perfect for a test, and sent his servant to charge the enemy. The zombie then dashed toward the other goblins at high speed without hesitation. It landed a solid punch right in the face of one of the enemies, breaking all its teeth. The other 2 goblins stabbed it in the back, but the zombie didn't even feel the attack. Another monster tried a side slash, but the undead creature remained standing. The goblins were frightened, and the hero explained that stabbing a zombie wouldn't take it down. Meanwhile, he took advantage of the distraction and grabbed one of the goblins by the neck. The young man lifted it and used Life Drain to absorb its vital energy. His minion landed a powerful kick on the other goblin, sending it flying far away. The zombie turned and punched the last monster that was still standing. With savagery, the creature bit the enemy's neck without any mercy. Warrior stood over a body and wondered if he could drain its strength. He tested the skill and saw that it worked on fallen bodies, and his stats increased again. With a confident smile, he decided it was now time to pick up the pace. There's a saying that defeating the first enemy is half the battle. In other words, the hardest part was always creating the first undead. The young man used his magic and ordered all the other bodies to answer his call. 4 more zombies rose with high stats, ready to obey him. With a satisfied smile, he knew this was what he really wanted. New zombies charged forward, and he confirmed that being a necromancer was the best. The undead creatures soon surround the other goblins in a brutal attack. One of the zombies is stabbed, but it doesn't even feel the enemy's blow. The little goblin panics when it sees the attack had no effect. The monster screams in fear as it faces its end for the first time. Then the undead servant savagely bites the enemy to finish it off. Cronus appears and says the contractor should fight with more dignity, but the young man says this is how necromancers fight, and tells him to get used to it. He reaches the limit of 20 controllable undead at the same time. With his magic, he prepares to absorb the energy from the fallen bodies. Then the hunter forms a small army of zombies to help him there. Right after, he sends his minions running into the forest. Suddenly, a fire arrow from an archer flies toward the monsters. One of the goblins is hit squarely by the surprise attack, and lets out a scream. The protagonist stops his servants and becomes alert to the new presence. He then tells the person to stop hiding and show themselves at once. Slowly, the mysterious hunters emerge from behind the trees in the woods. The group that invited him before appears and asks who he really is. Cronus is curious, and the young man recognizes those people from his past. He remembers they are the famous twin shadow hunters. The young man reveals that they were the ones who tried to eliminate him before his regression. The girl's name is Yukarendo, and she is a very skilled archer. Her brother's name is Yumarendo, and he is a very strong warrior. The young man comments that they don't seem as strong as he remembered. He notices they are still 1 star and now have 1 more member. He decides not to attack them as they only accepted a job in the past. One of the twins then asks if he is the one controlling the zombie. The hero knows that the Necromancer class isn't well known around here yet. He confirms the undead are his servants and shows them off with pride. The young man gets a brilliant idea as he looks at the group of hunters. He thinks he needs carriers and that they probably just want money. With that, he approaches the trio and offers them a job, leaving the leader confused. He proposes that they collect the magic stones for an 80-20th split. The three hunters look at each other in silence, seeming very suspicious of the proposal. Forest around them remains calm as the group discusses the offer. The archer and the other guy tell the leader not to trust the strange necromancer. Our hero just watches calmly from a distance, waiting for their decision. He finds their discussion quite noisy and continues to wait for the final answer. Group's leader then shouts that he accepts the deal, surprising his companions, but he asks for a 50-50th split in return to be more fair. The hunter offers 70-30ths as a final proposal, and the other reluctantly accepts. The guy from the team asks if their senpai is sure this is a good idea. The leader explains that if the guy wanted to, they'd already be lifeless on the ground. He believes that following the young man will earn them much more money than usual. After some time hunting, one of the guys feels completely exhausted. He falls to the ground asking for a break because he can't collect any more stones. The archer also sits down against a tree, saying she's at her absolute limit. The group's leader looks at the mountain of stones they managed to gather. He knew from the beginning that this hunter was no ordinary guy. The hunt went far beyond what he imagined, and the necromancer cleared everything. The hero points to more bodies, saying they are very profitable there. Tired, the group's leader asks if they can't take a short break. But the hunt continues, and his zombies take down another goblin without mercy. He then points to another body and tells them to go over there to collect. With a smile, he tells them not to rush, leaving the hunter speechless. The three are now certain that this guy is not a normal human being. After a while, the young man says it looks like they've cleared the whole area. With the mission accomplished, he decides to take a look at his current stats. A screen shows that all his attributes have increased significantly after the hunt. He is satisfied because his stats went up by 212 in 3 hours. Now that his level has increased, the young man heads deeper into the forest. It was time to go after the dungeon boss to finish things up, but soon a group of stronger goblins with a shaman appears in his path. Creature's leader says a foolish human has finally arrived in his domain. The protagonist scoffs, saying an idiotic goblin thinks he's the king of the place. The female hunter warns him that he's the southern chief, and it's better not to provoke him. With a glowing eye, the monster orders its servants to bring the human to his knees. The horde of goblins charges with full force, and the chief orders them to devour the young man. But the young man remains calm as his army of zombies is ready for action. One of the undead minions charges forward, but ends up being surprised by the enemy. The monster then manages to stab the zombie in a quick and accurate attack. The blow pierces through the servant's body, which falls to the ground. The system announces that the number of active familiars has decreased to 19. With a cold look, the necromancer commands the fallen body to answer his call. A skeletal hand soon emerges from within the goblin that was just defeated. The new zombie rises, and his number of minions returns to 20 again. The newly created undead then attacks its former horde companions. Without hesitation, it bites another goblin's neck in a very savage scene. The group is shocked to see him turn the bodies into his servants. The shaman prepares to use its magic and grabs an item from its waist. It raises a skull staff and begins to cast a powerful spell. Then the monster slams the staff on the ground, and a totem of courage inspires the goblins. The creatures get stronger, and their eyes glow with a red power. Chief boasts that his totem weakens enemies and strengthens allies, but a zombie shatters the totem, and the young man asks what that thing on the ground was. The monster turns in shock, unable to believe what just happened. Full of rage, it yells that a mere human destroyed its sacred totem. At that moment, the hunter's zombies place several staves on the ground. One of the creatures then uses a staff to forcefully attack another goblin. The hero's zombie then blocks the other monster's attack with the bone staff. The monster is surprised, not expecting its strike to be stopped. With a smile, the young man mocks the shaman and asks if he's frustrated. Goblin Chief becomes furious and grips his bone staff tighter. He then activates the Curse of Madness, and a red aura appears in the area. Spell affects the trio of hunters who feel a strong headache. With that, the goblins get stronger and their attributes increase by 50. Now stronger monsters attack the zombies, and one of them is quickly defeated. The goblin horde continues the onslaught, and the number of servants keeps decreasing. In a short time, the young man's army is reduced to just 10 zombies. Soon, the ground is littered with undead bodies and only 8 of them remain. The young man realizes the staff was that goblin chief's trump card. Shaman boasts that his staff is made from the grudges of goblins. But the young man notices an important detail. and realizes the weapon is made of bone. With a smile, he understands that victory will now be much easier. He then activates his bone control ability to turn the tables. The chief is confused as his staff begins to tremble for no reason. Right after that, the weapon is ripped from his hands by an invisible force. The hero now holds the chief's weapon, and the curse in the area is broken. The monster is in shock and asks what on earth the human just did. With the curse broken, the goblins suddenly become weaker. He then uses bone control to manipulate the skull on the staff. The young man notes that the reaction speed is better because of the grudges. With a smile, he says the monster can have its weapon back. Then he throws the staff with full force toward the startled chief. The creature is frozen in fear, unable to react to the attack. Staff then pierces through the goblin's chest with overwhelming force. The monster looks down and sees the skull of its weapon in its chest. It falls to the ground lifeless, and the young man uses life drain on its body since it was a boss. Suddenly, the protagonist turns with a slightly surprised look on his face. Then, the group of hunters stares back at the young man, not understanding anything. He then kneels and begins to collect the goblin chief's blood in a vial. He forgot that life drain had almost used up all the fallen monster's blood. With that, he leaves the cleanup to the trio, and the leader hesitantly agrees. The hunters look at the field full of bodies, unable to believe it all. Soon the scene changes, and we're back in a very modern city. Then the young man's foot finally steps out of the bright blue portal. He is now back in the real world after finishing his mission in the dungeon. Trio follows him out looking exhausted and carrying a huge backpack. The crowd is shocked by the amount of stones and doubts that it was just the four of them. The young man congratulates the trio and suggests selling the stones at a shop in Natsubara. But the leader says that for a fair price, it's better for them to sell the materials themselves. Hiro questions if he can trust people he just met today. The group is upset, but he says it was just a joke to tease them. He then asks how much they think they'll earn, and the answer is 6 million. At that moment, the young man takes the skull staff from their backpack. He comments that the weapon will probably be cheap, which the leader doesn't understand. The staff is cursed. It grants spiritual power but causes confusion, making it meant only for priests. The young man explains that since priests can't use spiritual power, it's useless to them. With that, he decides to keep the staff, much to the leader's surprise. The young man confirms and asks them to deduct the value when they settle the accounts. But the leader refuses, stating they would have never gotten the item on their own anyway. The hero asks if the other two agree, and they smile, saying they will follow the leader. He thinks that's exactly what he likes about that team. He arranges for them to enter the dungeon again, and the group eagerly accepts. The next day, they enter the ancient garden again for another hunt. The protagonist watches his zombie defeat another goblin with ease. With a serious look, he turns to the group and asks if they can still go on. The trio is collapsed on the ground in exhaustion, surrounded by bodies and magic stones. The group's leader says he can't take it anymore and that their bags are already full. So, the young man tells them to go on ahead, and the hunter agrees with relief. The protagonist, now alone, continues to walk through the forest with his army. Cronus questions why he sent them back, and he asks if it was that obvious. He explains that he doesn't want anyone to see what will happen from here on out. With that, he heads to the northern part of the ancient garden, a darker place. The vegetation there is denser, and the atmosphere is much heavier than in the rest of the portal. Suddenly, red eyes glow from within the bushes of that forest. A horde of frogmen with spears leaps toward the young man to attack him. He then commands his army of zombies to advance, and the great battle begins. Another monster looks at its fallen companion in shock and gets distracted for a moment. A zombie stabs it from behind, but the frogman manages to counter the attack. The number of servants starts to decrease as these creatures are much stronger. The frogmen prove to be very difficult opponents, and give the zombies a hard time. Hero understands that they have higher stats than the goblins, so it makes sense. He then uses potion control and throws his bone staff with magic. The item hits one of the frogmen, and a system screen opens up right away. The creature's body becomes completely oily, and it smiles in a very disgusting way. The young man is a bit unsettled by the frog monster's strange reaction. He then lands a powerful kick on the enemy to test his new ability. Staff increases piercing damage with the spiritual power infused into it. With that, the young man prepares to finish off the rest of the enemies there. He uses bone control to launch several stakes at the frogmen. He realizes that moving the staff and creating zombies consumes a lot of spiritual spiritual power. With the frogs defeated, he prepares to use his necromancy on the bodies. He feels a bit tired, but knows he can still handle it. Right after, a huge army of undead frogmen rises. One of the new minions punches a monster that was still standing. With that, a system screen announces that the young man has leveled up to level 6. With a smile, he says he'll soon return to his pre-regression state. He warns that the Sorcerer King can wait because he'll take care of him soon enough. Objective now is the secret area in the middle of those ancient ruins. With his army and Cronus, he walks toward the center of that mystical place. He then takes out the heart of a frogman that he saved before the fight. Cronus asks what he's going to do, but the young man tells him to be quiet. Then he pours the goblin shaman's blood over the monster's heart. With the ritual complete, the heart begins to glow with a strong greenish light. Holding the magical item, he prepares for what is about to happen. With a wicked smile, he says he's going to access a secret area of the portal. System announces that the secret has been discovered and he is being moved to another location. Right after that, the hunter is taken to an ancient trial arena. He stops in the middle of the dirt arena and observes the place carefully. The young man remembers finding the place before but couldn't enter at the time. With his servants, he approaches the portal of light in the center of the arena. A giant paw with sharp claws comes out of the portal. The young man is a bit surprised by what just emerged. Then, a screen announces that the trial only allows one person to enter. System asks him to prove his worth, and the young man prepares for the test. A giant draconian emerges, and the system states the time limit is 10 minutes. That place was created for constellations to choose hunters, and elite soldiers from the dragon's army were placed in the trials there. Cronus doubts his contractor will last even 10 seconds in the trial. The god suggests finding a new saint, and the young man gets very annoyed by that. He says that even if it's a draconian, it should be at a 1-star level. The creature then stomps its foot hard on the ground, preparing for combat. Monster faces the hunter and his small army of frogmen. The young man asks for a moment to modify his minions, leaving the creature confused. He jokes that even villains wait for the hero to transform before a fight. His undead servants look terrified by the modifications he's making. System informs him that the undead have been successfully modified using plague blood. They are now plague zombies and can be generated again if the conditions are right. Cronus is shocked by the action, and the young man boasts about having been a 9-star necromancer before. With a smile, he says he's ready for combat and tells the enemy to bring it on. The draconian then faces the army of frogmen with a look full of fury and contempt. Without wasting time, the creature charges forward with impressive speed to attack. The new zombies leap into the air to intercept the giant monster in its path. The plague creatures soon surround the draconian in a coordinated and brutal attack. They cling to the enemy's body, and the beast lets out a roar of pain and anger. One of the minions bites the monster's shoulder hard to fill it with venom. Even with the servants attacking it, the giant remains standing without showing weakness. With a powerful punch, it explodes one of the zombies into a cloud of green blood. System announces that it has been affected by the zombie's level 12 poison acid. The young man explains that he converted the frogmen's strength stats into a powerful poison. Creature becomes furious and starts to brutally crush all the other minions. With a powerful stomp, the arena floor cracks from the force of the blow. Beast lets out a deafening roar and runs toward the hunter with all its might. The young man praises the monster's resilience and uses spiritual power in his staff. With that, he creates an energy shield to protect himself from the draconian's attack. He notes that even with the poison, the enemy's strength is still absurdly high. Shield breaks, and the young man is thrown far away by the impact of the blow. With a victorious roar, the beast prepares to deliver the final blow to the hunter. But the young man activates bone control, and the staff's skull glows with power. The staff flies at high speed and pierces the side of the monster's body. The giant creature screams in pain as it's hit squarely by the surprise attack. Taking advantage of the distraction, he sends his remaining zombies to attack at once. The minions charge and bite the body of the draconian, which is wounded and distracted. The monster roars in anger and pain as the zombies continue to poison it. Soon, the giant's body turns completely black from the frogmen's poison. Even poisoned, it still manages to crush one of the zombies with its immense strength. Draconian then crushes another zombie with its sharp claws without mercy. With a smile, the young man says it was a good fight, but it has now come to an end. Kneeling on the ground, the giant lets out a final roar of pain and despair. The skull staff is then pulled out of the giant creature's body, and the hero takes his weapon back. Observing the monster fallen on the ground, he slowly approaches the defeated enemy to finish the combat. With a gesture, he prepares to use one of his strongest abilities. He activates Life Drain and absorbs the remaining energy of the giant monster. The creature falls lifeless, and the system announces that the trial was completed successfully. Cronus praises the victory, and the young man says he was never in danger there. With that, he gains the mark of resistance as a reward for the trial. He smiles with satisfaction as the new passive mark is a high-level power. The young man looks at the body and says the real reward is something else entirely. Cronus asks what he's going to do, and the young man prepares to use magic. He thinks that to create a good undead, he will need tools. The scene changes, and we are now in the city of Sadama on a sunny day. The hunter stops in front of an old warehouse with a determined look. He comments that the place hasn't changed at all since before his regression. Suddenly, a fiery explosion happens inside the warehouse, startling him. The young man coughs a bit from the smoke and says that not even that has changed in the end. Then, the young man with light hair also coughs from the other side of the smoke. With a smile on his face, the necromancer knows he has found the right person. The young alchemist emerges from the smoke, not understanding what is happening. He is Kenya Shinyani, the greatest alchemist in all of Japan at that time. The hero approaches and asks if the young man has a moment to talk. He introduces himself as Ryoga and asks to use his alchemy tools. The alchemist is visibly annoyed by the stranger's sudden request, but the young man says it won't be a win if he just borrows them. He reveals that he knows about the research on the mid-grade healing potion. With that, he offers to help, leaving the alchemist very confused. Inside the laboratory, we see various pieces of equipment and colorful test tubes. On top of a table, there is a large, detailed alchemy cauldron. The alchemist is shocked and wonders how he stabilized the potion. The hero explains that he would have only figured it out on his own in a few years. With a smile, he picks up a scalpel and asks if the other wants to test it. Without hesitation, the young man cuts his own arm with the sharp blade. Right after, he pours the red liquid from the potion onto his cut. The wound heals instantly, and he shows his healed arm, looking very smug. With a smile, the alchemist is amazed by the power of that potion. He asks if it really worked, and praises the incredible result. The young scientist tries to grab the test tube to analyze it better, but the necromancer pulls the item away from him with a smirk. He asks if the other is curious about the formula, and he quickly confirms with a wicked look. The young man asks the other to help him with a favor. He proposes that they work together and that he will teach him new recipes. In return, the profit split will be 60/40ths in the young man's favor. The alchemist thinks that the other has already fallen into his trap, just as he predicted with a wicked smile. The young man says that he is now his new partner. Then, the ring on his hand glows, and he prepares to use necromancy. The body of the giant draconian appears, lying on the laboratory floor. The scientist is in shock and asks what on earth that thing is. The young man explains that he is going to process the body because he is a necromancer. He then invites the other to help him in the process of creating the zombie, but the alchemist refuses because they haven't signed any contracts yet. He lets him use the space, and the necromancer agrees with a mocking look. The young man explains that the other's distrust is normal because of his past. He had the credit for his work stolen and was forced to resign. He says the other hesitates because he hasn't yet seen what he's truly capable of. With that, he offers to help so the other can see his power with his own eyes. With a serious look, the young alchemist stares back at the necromancer. He then agrees to the proposal and hands him one of his tools. The hero asks him to melt 5 mana stones in the right proportion. Soon the young man hands over the ready liquid, and the other is surprised by his speed. The necromancer praises his talent, and the other wonders what he will do. With the liquid in hand, he pours it over the draconian's body on the floor. He explains that he carves formulas and curses into the bones to improve the zombie. For this, he needs to repeat the process of applying the layers several times. Two then begin to work hard and non-stop on the monster's body. The alchemist yells in exhaustion as he continues to grind the items without rest. After a while, the hunter says the long process is finally over. He stretches, and the other shouts that it's actually been 3 days. The scientist wonders who on earth this guy is with so much power and stamina. Even as a 1-star, he moved the heart of a body with just his mana. He understands that the young man defies logic, but his ability is real. The protagonist turns and repeats the proposal of 60/40ths. The alchemist then accepts the hunter's initial offer. Without further hesitation, he explains that it would take him 2 years to finish the healing potion alone, but with the young man's help, it's a different story, so he decides to cooperate. With a smirk, the necromancer is satisfied with the result. He says he expects great things from his new alchemist and partner. Now, he needs a soul to serve as the core for the fallen dragon. With a plan in mind, the young man takes out his phone and makes a call. He asks if the group received the money and offers them a new job. The scene changes, and we are now in a forest near the border. Suddenly, the group of rookies appears and asks if he called them there. The hunter tells them to follow him, and the trio agrees to the order right away. They walk through the woods, and one of them says the place is dangerous and full of monsters. The hero says he just wanted to pay his respects to an old acquaintance of his. With a watchful eye, he looks for something among the trees of the forest. The group continues to follow the hunter through the tall woods very cautiously. Suddenly, the protagonist stops walking and notices something strange in the air. Right after that, they spot a lone orc on guard in a clearing. The system warns him that the creature is a 2-star and very dangerous, but he decides to test the performance of his newly processed bone weapon. With that, he activates bone control and the weapon launches a blade of energy. The gold bone releases a dark aura and a frightening power. The orc then reacts and throws its spear with all its strength in his direction. Spear flies at high speed to intercept the necromancer's attack. With a smile, he understands that the spear won't stop his magical blow. He scoffs, saying that unfortunately for the monster, the attack won't miss. The bone blade then shatters the spear's tip with absurd force. Blow hits the orc's shoulder and it screams in pain from the attack's impact. The young man says he aimed for the heart, but that the creature has good resilience. The monster then rips the piece of the weapon from its shoulder with great anger. Even wounded, the creature tries to use the rest of the spear to attack the young man. It charges with full force toward the hunter in a last desperate attempt, but the protagonist stands still, waiting for the right moment to counterattack. Suddenly, a large explosion of fire hits the monster head-on. Group's leader protects himself with a shield, and the hero praises his timing. With a glowing eye, he prepares to use his magic on the enemy again. He then asks, how about 3 instead of 1, and activates bone control. 3 bone tentacles soon restrain the wounded orc's body. The stakes pierce the monster in several places, finishing it off for good. With the creature defeated, the two observe the body lying on the forest floor. Group's leader is in shock, unable to believe he defeated the orc. The young man tells them not to stand around because the real work starts now. The leader asks if he's sure this is the right way to go. He confirms, and his new orc zombie minion rises behind him to follow. The young man explains that the person he's looking for is in that orc village. In the distance, they spot a large village with several guards at the wooden gate. The leader asks if he's sure, as he thought they were going to pay their respects. The necromancer confirms with a smile as his new orc servant stands by his side. He explains that the person they are looking for is in the monster settlement there. With a wicked smile, the young man says they can make some extra money from this. Trio of hunters is completely shocked by the young man's proposal. As time passes, the sun begins to set on the horizon of that forest. One of the orcs that attacked the group ends up falling lifeless in the middle of the woods. The protagonist then levels up to level 13 and his attributes increase, but the system warns that the absorption limit for that race has been reached. He thinks that he already imagined his ability wouldn't be infinite like that. With that, the hunter decides that for that day, the hunt was over. Back at the camp, he calls one of the female hunters over to talk. He then asks if she is ready, as 3 long days have passed. Soon, night falls and the full moon illuminates the sky of the dark forest. Inside the tent, the leader says their stats have risen and they will attack tomorrow. Outside, the trio agrees, and the leader asks the girl to stand watch. They say their goodbyes, and the young man's army of orc zombies stands guard there. 2 of the new minions stand in an alert position to protect the camp. Meanwhile, the 3 hunters sleep peacefully while the hero is away. Protagonist is sitting on a rock, observing the starry sky alone. He has finally leveled up, and wants to see the knowledge he has unlocked. With that, the system takes him to the library of the ancient master of the departed. Inside, he approaches one of the books to get the information, but access is denied, and he needs to be level 45 to read it. He gets annoyed because he can only access the beginner necromancer guides. With a sigh, he thinks that it's still better than having nothing. The young man then sits on the floor and begins to read one of the available books. With great attention, he analyzes each page of that ancient magic book. Eyes glow with full focus as he absorbs the knowledge. At dawn, the system announces that a new ability has been learned by him. The next day, one of the hunters from the trio wakes up very lazily and sleepily, but he soon opens his eyes, startled by something that suddenly surprises him. One of the protagonist's orc zombies is staring at him up close with its glowing eyes. The young man gets scared and jumps back as the hero tells him to wake up at once. The group's leader questions the scare but notices that the monster looks different today. With a smile, the young man says he just made some small improvements to his servants' army now consists of armored zombies with much greater power and durability than before. The new skill creates bone armor and allows him to manipulate the flesh of the undead. With his new minions, he says it's time to go to the orc settlement. The sun begins to set on the horizon as the group prepares for the big invasion. With that, the team of hunters advances with the army of zombies toward the enemy village. They finally arrive at the orc settlement, which looks like a large fortress. From the top of the tower, one of the guards spots the group and sounds the invasion alarm. Several orcs with spears gather inside the gates, ready to defend the place. But the Necromancer extends his hand and prepares to use his bone control there. Then, a strong explosion of energy shatters the wooden gate into several pieces. The guards who were there are thrown far away by the force of that magical attack. With a smile, he holds a bone spear and tells the monsters to stop with the noise. Suddenly, a giant orc with an axe emerges from within the smoke of the explosion. The creature lets out a furious roar as it prepares to attack the group of invaders. From the top of the walls, several orc archers appear and prepare their bows to shoot. A shower of arrows is then fired toward the hunters without any mercy. The group's leader uses an energy shield to protect everyone from the attack. The team's archer also gets ready, and her crossbow begins to glow with flames. She then fires a flaming arrow that multiplies and hits several enemies. One of the monsters is hit squarely in the chest and screams in pain from the fiery attack. The hero smiles with Cronus by his side and says it wasn't bad at all, as they're just getting started. With that, a horde of orcs rushes toward the invaders to crush them. Then, the young man commands his army of armored zombies to advance into combat. One of his minions dashes forward and lands a powerful punch. Then, the zombie fires a beam of blue energy that hits one of the monsters squarely. With a smile, he finds the result better than expected and says the reading was worth it. The other orcs are completely terrified upon seeing the power of their new enemies, but the young man warns that this was just the beginning of the real battle to come. The horde of orcs then charges with full force toward the Necromancer's zombies. One of the minions defends against an orc's blow with its reinforced bone shield. The monster then lands a powerful blow on the zombie's armor with its axe. With that, the system announces that the armor has been damaged and its defense has decreased. He then uses his magic and prepares to repair his servant's armor. The zombie's armor is repaired, and its durability increases again. Right after, he uses Flesh Ripple to pin the enemies to the ground. The flesh then pierces the chest of one of the orcs who wasn't expecting the attack. The other orcs start to eat the flesh that is on the ground and on their bodies. The group's leader observes everything and is shocked by the young man's intelligent strategy. He realizes that the young man's skill management is on another level. The zombie's flesh sticks to the orc's feet, preventing them from moving. With the enemies trapped, the zombies move back to await the next step. The giant orc chief becomes furious upon seeing his servants being easily defeated. He then begins to release a red aura, and his body starts to change. The system warns that Berserk mode has been activated and the danger level is critical. With a smile, the hero says the orc chief is finally getting serious. The orc chief unleashes a wild rage, and his body swells with a red power. The system announces that Berserk mode has been activated and the danger has evolved to a special level, but the hunter smiles, as he was tired of waiting for the monster to fight seriously. With a war cry, the creature swings its axe with all its might to attack. The blow is so powerful it cuts through the air and rushes toward the young man with full force. Unfazed, he extends his hand and activates his bone control ability. With that, enormous bone spikes shoot up from the ground to stop the enemy's attack. The monster is then pierced by several stakes that go through its body, trapping it. The giant creature then falls to its knees, completely immobilized by the attack. It realizes the bones are taking over its body and tries to resist. With a wicked smile, the young man says it's no use, as his spiritual power is consumed. Monster screams in agony as the dark magic takes over its entire body. He tells it not to be pessimistic as the power consumption rises to 40%. The young man thinks that using 6 bones at once uses an absurd amount of spiritual power. He knows that if one bone comes loose, the monster will move, and thinks about aiming for the heart. With that, the hunter decides to use bone control again for the final attack. His spiritual power reaches 68, and a bone spear hits the orc with a direct hit to the chest. The monster finally falls to the ground, defeated and still. The young man is out of breath. as the fight consumed almost all his spiritual energy. He then extends his hand and activates Life Drain to recover his strength. A white aura surrounds him, and his spiritual power recovers to 74. With a confident smile, he feels refreshed and ready for the next battle. The other orcs see their fallen chief and are paralyzed with pure fear at the sight. One of them shouts for everyone to run, and the entire horde begins to flee the village, but the young man won't let them escape, and his eye glows with a green light. He activates Flesh Ripple and traps the feet of the monsters running away. With their feet trapped, the creatures trip and fall on top of each other. Soon, all the orcs who tried to flee are down and immobilized on the field. With a smile, he uses necromancy and raises a new army of armored orcs. And so, the once feared orc chief is now just another figure on the ground. The trio of hunters looks at the fallen monsters and wonders how much money they'll make from this. But the young man picks up the chief's axe and says that it's the real prize of the mission. A screen shows the weapon is the rare blood axe, which gets stronger with blood. With a smile, he says it was worth conquering the orc village in the end. He then hands the weapon to the group's leader and leaves the collecting to them. The hunter agrees and tells the young man to go rest while they take care of everything. With that, the protagonist walks away from the group and heads to another part of the forest. He stops in front of an ancient tree and says he's finally found what he was looking for. The young man then calls out to the hidden person and asks them to come out so they can talk. But the giant tree remains silent and gives no response to the young man. With a sigh, he takes a bone from his bag and prepares to use force. He smiles wickedly as the bone in his hand glows with flames. With his eye glowing, he prepares to strike the tree with the magic bone. He then attacks the tree with all his might, and a green aura surrounds his powerful strike. Then, a dark energy explodes, and he wonders if he has to be aggressive with everyone. A shadowy figure with red eyes appears and asks who dares to disturb it. With a smile, the young man says he's happy to finally meet him for real. He calls him Sorkashuaji, the famous magic fighter, and the soul is surprised. The specter asks how the young man knows its name and eyes him with suspicion. The hunter says he knows he stopped a monster wave 35 years ago. A stone cenotaph appears as a memory of the ancient hero's deeds. Sora was a powerful warrior who had the talents of both a mage and a fighter. The soul then smiles and says that it seems his passing wasn't entirely in vain. But the young man comments that not everyone was lucky enough to leave a name behind. The ghost turns serious and asks what the young man means by that statement. He asks if the soul remembers Nero, the vice master of an old guild. A scene shows an entire village being consumed by a giant fire. A man on the radio was desperately calling for backup in the middle of the chaos. He was reporting that there were still civilians in the farming district surrounded by monsters. Man then shouted his own name into the radio in a final plea for help. He screams in desperation that it's impossible and asks for backup to help him there. But the radio replies that backup is not available and they can't provide support. The man falls silent for a moment with a look of pure disbelief and sadness. He understands they were used as bait so the others could escape through the north gate. A voice on the radio confirms that, thanks to them, the main force managed to escape. The warrior becomes furious because they were sent in knowing there were civilians there. The voice on the other end then asks him not to be so pessimistic about the situation. The one who betrayed him says the honor of stopping the monster wave now belongs to the survivors. Filled with rage, the man smashes the radio on the ground, realizing that if you live, you're a hero. A monster then leaps toward a fallen civilian to finish them off, but the warrior uses dark magic and saves the person from the creature's attack. He then continues to fight to clear a path through the chaos and fire. Man orders his men to protect the civilians and escape from that place. His comrades hesitate for a moment, looking very concerned about him. He then yells in anger that it was an order and for them to go immediately. The soul explains that the man who sent him to his doom became a great hero. With that, all records related to him were completely erased from history. The protagonist says it's tragic because the one who passed away had his glory stolen. Spectre gets furious and tells the young man to stop beating around the bush and get to the point. With a smirk, the young man offers to help the ancient hero get his revenge. Ghost stares at him, its red eyes glowing with hatred and suspicion. The young man proposes they form a contract for him to become a powerful undead. The ancient warrior's soul continues to stare at him in silence. Filled with anger, the necromancer repeats the offer and invites him to join him as a servant. Then, the ring on his hand glows with a strong, greenish necromantic energy. He shows the draconian's body and says he has already prepared a vessel for the soul. The ghost looks at the monster's body, seeming very thoughtful about the offer. The soul admits that in its current state, it hadn't even considered getting revenge on its enemies. He then accepts the offer. but says he has one condition to seal the deal. The ancient hero warns that he will refuse any act that harms innocent people. The young man thinks that the condition is the same as before and that the hero's heart hasn't changed. Just as expected from a true hero, he thinks with an admiring smile. With that, the young man agrees to the condition and promises he won't break the deal. The soul then accepts the offer and says it will become his undead servant. The system announces that he has acquired possession of the earthbound spirit, Soku Kashuaji. He remembers that before the regression, he turned the soul into a dread knight. Then, the young man wonders what would have happened if he had given it a strong body from the start. Cronus praises the Draconian's body, saying it's a true masterpiece. A screen shows the new servant's status, who is now an incomplete eldritch dragon. The young man gets excited because the magic fighter trait didn't exist in the skeleton knight. The screen explains that the trait combines the aptitudes of a mage and a martial artist. He then asks the new servant how he feels in his dragon body. The creature stretches and says the body is inferior to the one he had in life. The hunter understands the servant is incomplete because of the curse formula used, but he smiles, satisfied because this was a much better start than before. With his new minion he turns, and the two of them start walking away from the village. Suddenly, the creature stops him, objecting to being called a minion in a very annoyed tone. At that, the dragon shrinks in size and stands with its arms crossed, looking angry. Hero asks what happened, and the servant says he didn't like being called a minion. The young man suggests using his real name, but the creature says it has already discarded its name. He thinks the servant is quite troublesome and that his personality has changed a lot. Dragon asks for a name that intimidates opponents but can't think of a good one. The young man suggests Fafnir, Black Dragon, and Tiamat, but the other rejects all the names. Annoyed, he tells the servant to call himself Orochi, and the creature immediately refuses again. The hunter wonders if he should just punch him, and the dragon scoffs in disdain. But the creature changes its mind and says, the first name, Fafnir, is good enough. The young man sighs, exhausted, and agrees to call him that before turning to leave. The new Fafnir stops him again and complains that he's practically without any clothes now. He then looks around the orc village searching for something to wear. Creature grabs a piece of cloth from a tent to use as clothing. The young man wonders if this was the ancient hero's true personality all along. Scene returns to the lab, and the alchemist shouts upon seeing something strange in the night. He gets excited and says the body that was in the solution is now moving. Fafnir says he has obtained a soul, and the scientist goes crazy, wanting to study him up close. The dragon thinks the guy is weird and asks if he can punch him, but the young man says no. With a serious look, the protagonist then gets his new partner's attention. He tells the trio they're going back to Tokyo to organize the items, and the group agrees. Back at the lab, the young man prepares to use his necromancer skills. With his magic, he begins to work on the body of the orc chief he defeated earlier. He sits down and wonders what he should do with that monster's body. Now, the creature and the scientist watch the young man, waiting to see what he will create with his wicked smile. He then asks the two of them if they're curious about it. The alchemist panics and says he's not curious at all about the new project, but he can't suppress his curiosity and starts mixing the ingredients. The scientist admits that the young man always manages to exceed his expectations. With a smile, the young man uses flesh separation on the orc's body to prepare it. The magic works, and the monster's flesh slowly begins to separate from its skeleton. Cronus asks if he's going to create another servant, and he says, "You can never have too much power." The system announces that the completion rate is high and the skeleton's stats will double. The alchemist then hands him an extract to use in the creation of the new servant. The extract gives the skeleton a specialization in defense, and he thinks he can use it. With a smile, he thinks he can use his new creation as a bodyguard. New skeleton's feet touch the ground, and it prepares to stand up. A 2-star skeleton guard rises, holding 2 shields to protect itself. He orders the skeleton to protect him well whenever he uses his life drain. The young man praises his new servant for its excellent work and is very pleased with it. Scientist questions him, asking why he decided to create a skeleton this time. He explains that bones don't decay and that he can manipulate them however he wants. The alchemist is impressed that he even thought about the undead's maintenance. He says he needs to leave for a boring errand and asks the other to look after the servant. The alchemist asks, confused, where he's going at this time of night. He explains that he's going to the Pantheon to receive a holy spell because his level went up. Scientist is left completely speechless upon hearing that unexpected answer. He then panics and asks what on earth a holy spell means. Shocked, the partner asks if the young necromancer was a priest all along. The image of a priest's skeleton appears behind him, reinforcing the doubt. With Cronus by his side, he says he's actually a very devout believer. The alchemist yells, "That's impossible," and the young man says the comment hurt his feelings. He changes the subject and asks if the patent for the healing potion has been registered yet. The scientist confirms, and the young man praises his speed, but he says he doesn't like to procrastinate. The partner explains that the problem is advertising, as the exhibition is not until next year. Hearing this, the hunter offers to promote the potions if he gets a chance. Alchemist agrees and immediately hands him a vial of the new potion to take with him. With a wicked smile, the young man says they'll make a fortune if everything goes right. He then imagines himself swimming in money and says that cash makes the world go round in the end. His partner watches him and wonders if that guy is really a priest. Scene changes to the Pantheon, a tower that appeared after the Great Cataclysm. Inside, people gather to receive spells and blessings from the constellations. He walks through the place and thinks it's the gods who demand offerings from their followers, but he doesn't feel any divine presence and finds it strange that there are valuable items on the ground. The young man starts to get out of breath from the long climb in that place. He then complains that there are no escalators or elevators around. The hunter wonders if he needs to show devotion by climbing 108 steps with Cronus by his side. He complains that this is really tough and that he's very tired. The god asks how much is left, and he says it's the same distance they've already climbed. Then, the young man realizes they are only halfway to the top. He gets annoyed and thinks there had better be a good reward for all this effort. With no other choice, the young man continues to climb the long stone staircase of the Pantheon. He finally arrives in a huge hall with a ceiling that shows the stars. With a serious expression, the protagonist observes the sacred place with great attention. Several constellations show reactions, and little Cronus starts to laugh at the situation. God then takes his true form and says it's now his turn to act. He looks at the starry sky and prepares to show his power. With a touch, he registers the giant of the defiant heavens in the pantheon of gods. With that, the young man acquires the spells Unholy Blessing and Wedge of Retribution. Skills increase stats and damage, and the young man says the power is very good. The ancient titan laughs proudly and boasts of his incredible divine greatness, but the system announces that the god's divinity is still weak and needs achievements. Star's light is faint, and the young man calls the system trash, making the god sad. Even so, he smiles because what matters is that he got stronger in the end. Soon after, the young man walks through the city streets with a very thoughtful look. He goes on his way, calmly observing the nightlife. Suddenly, a voice calls out to him and asks why he is leaving the Pantheon. A blonde, muscular guy named Shadaru Sadak appears and greets him. The hero looks at him with a confused expression and asks who he really is. The big guy says he looked after him at the orphanage and asks if he remembers now. The young man recognizes him as a piece of trash who used to shake down the other kids. A memory shows the bully holding him by the collar in an old room. He accuses him of having snitched on him to the director and threatens him angrily, but the young man retaliates with a powerful punch to the aggressor's face without hesitation. The hunter asks if his nose has healed yet, and the other guy gets furious at the taunt. The bully then calms down and says he almost lost his head for a moment. With a smile, he shows a shiny pin attached to his shirt. The item is the emblem of the famous and powerful Arajiri guild from that region. He calls him a low-level hunter and warns that things won't be like they were before. But the young man stares back at him and says that for him, nothing has really changed. Big guy gets angry again and grinds his teeth in a rage at the young man. He then yells at the other not to be so arrogant and gets ready to attack him. With that, the bully moves forward and tries to grab him with his hand to intimidate him. However, another man appears and grabs his wrist, stopping the surprise attack. Bully is surprised and tries to explain to his captain what happened. The newcomer then suggests they move to another location and have an official fight. In his thoughts, the man wonders why the young man picked a fight with the guild. The captain asks if they know each other and suggests they let their fists do the talking. The aggressor smiles and says the young man just became a hunter and that it's a joke. But to everyone's surprise, the protagonist accepts the challenge right away. The bully is confused, as he didn't expect him to accept so quickly. With a smirk, the young man asks if the other guy is scared of the fight. The aggressor grinds his teeth and yells that he can't take back what he just said. Scene then changes to the Arajiri Guild's affiliated gym in a modern building. In the center of the arena, the two hunters face each other as the fight is about to begin. The young man says he's a priest and that his servant will fight in his place. The enemy scoffs at the summoned beast and shows off his necklace and ring that boost his stats. With a contemptuous look, he says his items won't give him any advantage. At that, the arena system activates, and a symbol of light appears on the ground. With a smile, the blonde guy prepares for the battle that is about to start. The system announces that a barrier will protect the lives of both fighters and the match begins. The arena is ready, and the system activates for the fight to finally start. With a smile, the system begins to measure the HP and defense of the hunters in range. It announces that a barrier will be activated if anyone's life is in danger. The aggressor then mockingly asks if his opponent is scared of the fight. The young hero glares at him with disdain and wonders what on earth the other guy is talking about. Meanwhile, the creature thinks that he never imagined he would run into the Arajiri guild here. He then gets ready for battle, wanting to see how well his body can hold up. Creature states that against a member of a Rajiri, there's no reason to hold back, but the young man asks him not to end it all in one blow, because he wants to test something. The draconic servant then grumbles that holding back is harder for him now. Angrily, the bully shouts that he's going down and that he'll show him his true place. He charges forward with everything he's got, and prepares a powerful strike with his spear to hit him. But the creature effortlessly blocks the enemy's attack using only his foot. The aggressor is shocked to see the monster stop his special attack with ease. Unfazed, the blonde man retreats and prepares to use another one of his skills. With a wicked smile, he activates his second form for a piercing attack. Watching, the young man thinks that his servant's reaction time is better than before. The creature asks if the other guy thought such a slow attack could ever hit him. With incredible speed, the draconic one moves his hand to stop the blow again. He catches the enemy's spear with his hand, and the blonde man is in shock at the sight. The aggressor realizes he can't move and becomes paralyzed with pure fear. With contempt, the monster calls him pathetic for attacking without thinking about the next step. He then warns that if this were a real battle, the other guy would already be finished. The creature realizes he forgot what his master asked, and that he was supposed to hold back, but it was too late. With his hand on his opponent's chest, he prepares to attack with everything. The servant then lands a powerful punch right in the enemy's face. Big guy screams in pain as he's sent flying by the strong impact. The monster says that he cried the last time he got his nose broken in a fight, but the young man comments that this time he only yelled for a second, and that he's grown up. The aggressor gets up filled with rage and shouts that he's a scoundrel. Furious, the bully charges once more with his spear to attack the servant, but the creature blocks the blow with his foot again without any difficulty. The impact of the block is so strong that it cracks the entire floor of the battle arena. Even so, the aggressor doesn't give up and prepares another attack with his spear. Monster says that if you use the same move twice, your opponent will read you like a book. With a quick spin, the draconic servant strikes the enemy's leg with his tail. Bone in the bully's leg breaks from the impact, and he feels immense pain. Wide-eyed, the aggressor is in shock at what just happened. Monster then says it's over, and prepares for the final blow of the fight. He raises his hand to finish the fallen enemy and end the battle right there. With tears in his eyes, the blonde man understands that the fight is really over for him. But the captain appears and tells the servant to stop the attack before it's too late. The protagonist gets annoyed because his plan was interrupted in the middle of the fight. In his thoughts, he notes that they arrived faster than expected. The system then announces the end of the match. With the aggressor down on the arena floor, the captain helps him and says he'll call a priest to heal him as quickly as possible. Just then, the young man appears and says that he already has a priest right there in front of him. The captain retorts that a one-star healing spell can't fix broken bones. He then asks how the young man plans to heal his injured companion. The young man takes out a vial and says he'll use a medium-grade potion to heal him. The other guy asks if he hasn't seen the news about the mass production of those potions. The bully shouts that he doesn't need any charity and tells the young man to leave, but the young man insists, thinking that he was looking for a way to advertise the potions. With a wicked smile, he says he found the perfect test subject right here. The young man then pours the red potion on the fallen enemy's broken leg. Captain is shocked because the blonde man was healed, and even his bones were mended. With a look of desire, the captain thinks that he really wants that potion for himself. The hero smirks because his plan to sell the potions worked out perfectly. The other man asks where he bought those mass-produced potions. Protagonist thinks with a smile that his opponent took the bait perfectly. The young man asks if, being a captain, he must be a 3-star hunter. With a smile, he challenges him to a fight and says he'll tell him where he got the potion if he wins. The captain accepts, as long as he reveals the source of the potion, regardless of the final outcome. The young man says the last fight was too short, and that this time he'll fight with everything he has. With that, the two of them take their positions and a new combat is about to begin in the destroyed arena. System announces the start of the match, and the captain leaps to attack the servant at once. He uses his 5th form of swordsmanship up and strikes the monster with a sharp attack. The man thinks it was impressive that the creature reacted to his swift blow, but he knows there's a speed limit for a body as large as that one. The system announces that the damage has lowered its defense, and the creature feels the pain from the blow. With that, the captain continues to attack the giant servant with his swift strikes. The protagonist watches the fight and thinks that it's going exactly as he had imagined. He understands that a speed-based fight is a terrible matchup for the draconic one, and that's why he used the potion as bait to provoke the guild leader. The creature decides to use the fight to get used to his new heavy body. The young man praises his servant's attitude, calling him his right-hand man in the fight. He then says that in that case he can't just stand by and watch the combat. With that, the young man casts Unholy Blessing to strengthen his servant in battle.
And that's where we wrap up today's video. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. If you've enjoyed this one and want to see more, leave your comment down below. Also, don't forget to drop a like to support our channel and subscribe to stay up to date everything that comes out. See you next time. Bye-bye. And a big hug to everyone. I'm out.